Got it. So, I mean, you mentioned players seem to appreciate it way more than you as developers do, which brings to mind the idea of surprises that you guys have encountered from the gameplay. Like, we've seen a lot of emerging gameplay come out of just single platform multiplayer over the years, where when people start interacting with one another, stuff starts happening that developers never really accounted for, and that helps contribute to kind of the evergreen fun of playing a game. Has introducing play across device platforms sparked any emerging gameplay that you wouldn't necessarily think you'd see on a single platform game? Do iOS players play differently than, say, Android players, or have you noticed a difference, like when you're playing on the PC versus when you play on the iOS? What's really surprised you?
Yeah, I would say, well, I don't know how surprising this should be, but it has surprised us as Android users, love to try to hack or hack as much as they can, and iOS users, it doesn't even occur to them. So we have a kind of split community. I mean, it's not split, but there are certain members who very much enjoy hacking and messing around with the game as much as they possibly can to do whatever they want. And then we have a very dedicated community who anything that's impure in the game, they absolutely hate. We sometimes have battles on our IRC channel or on our forums. People are like, why are you doing this? I don't want to play with Android, I just want to play on iOS. So, we see that kind of thing. Our PC and console versions that aren't out yet, but I assume though people will play the game vastly different. I mean, on PC you can actually individually aim with the mouse at enemies, which adds much more strategy than, well, not much more, but there can be a lot more strategy than auto-targeting present on all the other devices if they so choose to.
Got it.
And also modding on the PC, which won't be available on anything else, and that would be a huge thing.
So you guys have touched on the fact that we've said the word community about a dozen times throughout this, and obviously community is more than just the players being able to play together. Like, how much forethought did you guys put into creating resources for them to interact once they've left the game? What kind of primary tools do you guys use to bring those guys together? You talked about getting a lot of feedback directly from them, communicating directly to them. What are you guys using to actually facilitate all of that communication and glue everybody together?
I would say our first major lesson as an indie developer was that we needed someone full-time on customer support. Right out of the gate, we didn't have that. We were like, oh, we can manage it, and we were completely overwhelmed. So, now we have someone, we try to make sure all the channels are open and available. That's one interesting thing that we find, is that Android users know where to find support. I mean, on the Google Marketplace, it's very apparent what email address they email if they have an issue, and we get a constant stream of Android support questions that we answer almost immediately. On iOS, they often don't know where to find support. So we try to throw it into as much of the descriptions in our Facebook page and our forums as possible. So I think that's really important on mobile. In terms of the community as a whole, we've tried to make there be specific spots where people can discuss the game. We've tried to facilitate them as much as possible. We've made our media assets for the game open up to users so they can create a wiki. I think our first week of launch, all of a sudden we had all these Koreans emailing us saying they wanted to make a fan page, but they didn't have any art assets. So we made sure all of that stuff was ready for them, and just having these big centers for people to communicate allows us to streamline our messaging to the community. We can make sure they know what we think as developers and that we can interact with them on a consistent basis. But it also allows them to interact with themselves and come up with stuff that we would have never thought of.
Got it. And I'm kind of curious, Tim, you guys started with a team of 6 or 7 guys on this. How many people were actually working on the online aspects of this?
Oh, just one, really. I mean, so I wouldn't even say that was a full-time job. It was probably maybe a third of my engineering time and a third of my co-engineer's engineering time. So probably less than a full person, actually.
Okay, so it's totally, for a small studio, then it's totally feasible to attack that stuff. There's just a lot of, when you start, the real challenge is dealing kind of more with community management, or we haven't even talked, I don't think, about pricing strategy when you're talking about the multiple platforms and what that means when you have an Android audience that by and large doesn't pay for things, and an iOS audience that pays a little tiny bit for things, and now you're rolling it out on other platforms where they have a higher price point expectation. How do you manage all of that?
I would say that the technical aspects of getting the cross-platform multiplayer to work were the easy part.
Yeah, we had to play a lot with the price, and it boiled down to something. Basically, you have to stick with the price that's standard on the platform, and that's just something that you have to do in order to be viable on that platform. We've seen very few complaints about different pricing on different platforms, which surprised us genuinely. We thought for sure, Android goes free, no one's going to buy our game on iOS, right? Because they're like, well, why do Android users get it free? That wasn't the case at all. In fact, we saw almost no impact in the iOS market when we released Android.
If anything, our iOS sales went up because Android got hundreds of thousands of downloads overnight. So
yeah,
got it. And now you're about to add PC and PS3 and Xbox into the mix. What kind of expectations do you have for that? Like, what do you anticipate is going to happen? Do you have any hopes? What do you hope to see come out of this stuff?
Well, we hope PC goes on a lot of Steam sales. No, if we're talking about pricing, it's very different there too, and you still have to be platform specific. In terms of general awareness, we really, really hope that the title is good enough and well received enough to break out as one of these indie hits or something that's in the general knowledge of online users and hardcore gamers, and that's kind of our goal. And we have a lot of ways we're planning to sustain that. We have like a robust DLC roadmap already laid out and completed, and we're trying to support the game as much as we possibly can to really engage our community once we come out.
You touched on it a little bit earlier as well, that the PC version in particular has really robust mod support. It's Unreal based, so Unreal inherently supports mods unless you fight against that. But we've tried to take it a step further and supporting what I would call total conversions of the game that still use matchmaking. So if you, for example, changed all of the assets in the game and all of the gameplay code, you could still use the online matchmaking to find other users who were playing that same mod. It will automatically detect basically the memory signature of what total conversion or mod you're running, and will matchmake specifically with those players behind the scenes. So that's kind of our trick to get the mod experience on PC to be really seamless. And of course, the game automatically lists all of your installed mods and total conversions, so you don't have to really mess around with the files on disk or anything like that. So we hope that because essentially every asset and line of gameplay code in the title can be rewritten, that we hope to see some really interesting stuff. We'd love to see like a Dota clone on Dungeons and Dragons, for example, please.
Or a zombie tower defense game.
That'd be great.
So, you touched a little bit there on stuff we can expect in the future. Multiplayer is obviously just one form of online feature. Supporting modability is another. Downloadable content. Obviously, are there any other plans for kind of bigger online features that kind of leverage some of that, especially as it leverages the cross-platform aspect?
So our strategy on PC, as we've said, is modding tools. People will have these modding tools available to them, and we'll teach them how to use it if need be, and run competitions to really encourage them to change the game as their own. Then across the whole board, we have DLC and updates to keep users engaged. And we had to think of something else for console, because that wasn't enough, and we kind of kept coming back how Monday Night Combat worked, where they would tweak the statistics of everything and really balance it so users had a consistent experience the first couple of months they played. So we made sure that we have a way in the console version so we ourselves can really engage users, meet up with them in community groups, drop them special items, run special online game modes which aren't available if you're not playing with the developers. And we thought something like that was really important to keep our community on the console platform strong, because we're simply unable to, on PC, on Halloween we can drop a pumpkin in the tavern if we want. We do the same thing on mobile, and people love that, but we can't do that on console, so we have to find another way to engage our audience.
Not unless we want to go through a 6-week certification period on a title update.
And a lot of money.
But that's definitely kind of the console strategy. In terms of GameSpy Technology specifically, as currently we are focused on the cross-platform matchmaking leaderboards which are implemented, but there are a lot of the other aspects of the tech that we do really want to use as we launch kind of the updated versions of the game. And that really runs the gamut from cloud save support, so that when the PC version launches, when the PS3 version launches, you can easily get your data that you generated on consoles. On mobile.
So if you've been playing on iOS or Android all this time and you decided that you wanted to start playing on PS3 but you didn't want to start from the beginning, your goal is to use cloud services to make it possible for people to access their save data.
That's correct, and that lets us skirt the system of hey, you can't just drop a file onto your PS3. But what you can do is you can connect to GameSpy, it can download the data for you, and that way you can get it onto your PS3. obviously with appropriate hack detection on our part. But cloud support's a big one, and that's coming. And also we want to provide users a way to visualize all the data we're collecting themselves, not just check it out in-game through in-game leaderboards, but really run some graphics kind of analysis on it and be able to display that on our website. So if they want to see statistics on how many squires have placed in the top 10% of the leaderboards on a particular level, they could run that kind of query publicly.
Oh, so you guys are talking about not just providing the visualizations themselves, but providing like APIs and tools for them to
maybe
query
not,
the data and actually
possibly not quite an API.
Okay.
It will probably be driven through our backend, but a set of options they can use that through our backend run the query through GameSpy and then provide the visualization.
Got it. Have you seen a demand from the community to kind of start doing that stuff? Like, are people digging in already?
There are a lot of statistics mongers. I was going to use another word, but mongers are good. There are a lot of people who love their statistics on our community and are clamoring for better ways to kind of visualize that overall, and that's going to, I think, increase many-fold when the other platforms launch and a bunch of the users enter the game space.
Okay, awesome. Well, that's about all the questions that I have listed, but I don't know if we have a mic. I know there's a mic stand out there. Do we have a mic? If anybody has any questions in the audience actually, that gentleman, you just want to hand him the mic.
And we would love as many questions as possible. So.
Yeah.
So I'd like to hear about the technical communication issues between the different devices. I don't know how GameSpy fits in with that. I haven't looked at their APIs yet. But at some level, you need to get communication going between the devices. I don't know if you both have a central server or it's all peer-to-peer, but I'd like to hear more about that aspect.
Sure. It is peer-to-peer. GameSpy effectively handles the matchmaking of linking the peers together, and furthermore, it does handle the NAT traversal, which is important, especially with mobile. So basically, GameSpy gets our different players linked up. And then in terms of the actual communication, there's a socket implementation on each platform that is kind of the low-level driver. And beyond that, we are just passing network data through Unreal, through its own networking engine. And that goes through the socket implementation on each platform and comes out on the other side. There does have to be some conversion of string data for GameSpy in particular, but other than that, the key challenge was just making sure that the versions were conformed to each other, and what that means in Unreal specifically is that they know each other's network object IDs. So they all have a slightly different set of media, meaning they have slightly different network object IDs, but each platform has a list of the network IDs of the other platform, and that allows the IDs to be consistent between the different versions that may have been created. One version may have been created 1 week on iOS, and then 3 weeks later we created the PS3 version. But they might have slightly different media, but the conforming helps. It's like a mapping of network IDs for object references.
So does GameSpy give you a socket then?
GameSpy, I didn't actually do most of the lower level network implementation. I think GameSpy gives Unreal a socket, and then
Unreal passes it up there. How do you deal with the conforming aspect when you have a future release, like the PS3 comes out? Do you have to go back and update the iOS app to have that conforming data?
Not quite so. As long as the newer releases are conformed to the older releases, the older version just thinks it's talking to the old version of the game.